Def Jam games are a bit of a strange case in the gaming industry, popular enough to warrant multiple sequels, but not popular enough to be remembered, remastered, or revived. This line of hip hop fighting games spent a hell of a lot of time spinning in my various consoles over the years, and I was shocked to find out that nowadays, while a few friends had heard of the franchise, none had ever seen or played any of the entries. That really blows me away. I mean, even my older sister liked these games, and all she usually played was Spyro the Dragon. I mean, come on. Rap music, video games, punching people? This trio was like a dream come true to me, and I was lucky enough to get my hands on a copy at the perfectly rational age of 10. Now, I did own the second entry in the series long before the first, but that didn't stop me from falling in love with the world they'd built and picking up anything I could find with the Def Jam name on it over the next few years. Each of these games feature story modes that revolve around a playable hero making a name for themselves by brawling through the underground. Def Jam is a record label started by Rick Rubin in 1984 in partnership with Russell Simmons, signing a variety of genres over the years but specializing in hip hop, rap, and R&B. The first Def Jam video game was the collaborative brainchild of Josh Holmes and Daryl Anselmo, who had the idea for an arcade wrestling game based in the world of hip hop while brainstorming during a marketing meeting as producers at EA Games. The pair had been assigned to the subsidiary EA Big, whose focus was on larger than life extreme sports titles and more than anything, putting the fun back in sports based games. After co-creating monster hit NBA Street and helping consult on an unknown martial arts fighter codenamed Kung Fu Fighting, they somewhat jokingly broached the topic of an urban fighter. Although neither of them had faith in the idea after leaving the meeting, with Daryl going so far as to say he felt bad for even contributing to it, they had planted a seed that the rest of the executives couldn't shake. One of these executives was Steve Schnurr, then head of music at EA, who happened to be close friends with several members of the Def Jam upper management team, including the president of the company and resident gamer, Kevin Liles. During the numerous meetings that followed, both teams recognized the potential profit and market share that could be gained from creating a unique fighting game that allowed consumers to interact with the popular hip hop artists they knew and loved. Lauren Wurtzer Seawood was the president of marketing for Def Jam Games at the time, and she was tasked with overseeing everything on their side of the deal, including artist participation. This process did go smoothly, though, as they'd already built a massive roster of rappers they had positive relationships with. Most notably for this story, Method Man, Redman, and Ghostface Killah of the Wu-Tang Clan. These three had previously been involved in the infamous Thrill Kill demo, which after much public scrutiny was scrapped and rebranded as Shaolin Style. Wu-Tang Shaolin Style did release as a 4-player fighting game to mixed reviews, although no one from Wu-Tang looks back on it fondly, and Method Man even stated they were never paid for their participation in the game. Many of the artists being pursued to participate in this title, however, were also gamers themselves and eager to be a part of this exciting new project. Josh and Lauren did have to fly all around the country to sign on the extensive roster of rappers, but most were easy to appease as everyone agreed that the artists should be represented in fun and accurate ways and would be actively involved in their characters' development. Artists can be seen in behind-the-scenes footage giving detailed instructions on what their blazing move finisher should look and feel like. Ghostface did have some particular demands, though, stating he wanted his famous eagle bracelet to come to life in the game and claw at his opponent. Josh Holmes knew this technically wasn't possible within their engine, but agreed to it anyway, and regretted it later when he met up with Ghost once again and was given an extremely hard time about it. These mostly friendly working relationships led to an expedited production process, even with the language barrier between the development teams. A name for the project was eventually agreed upon, leaning into the mano a mano narrative that was shaping up at this time, Vendetta. With all of the surrounding circumstances falling into place, all that was left to do was, actually build the game. EA decided that 8 months would be an appropriate development timeline for this project, which would usually spell out death for any team. However, veteran wrestling game developers Aki out of Japan were just the guys for the job. Aki were on a bit of a hot streak after shipping titles like WCW NWO Revenge and WWF No Mercy, and had been actively developing an unnamed wrestling game for some time with the hopes that it would eventually be adorned with the WCW moniker. With this new opportunity in tow, however, lead programmer Hiro Abe and artist Hiroya Tamura would work tirelessly to adapt the current engine and project into the proposed theme, a wrestling game built for and set in the culture of the urban streets. Now, the contrast of the classic wrestling combat system set against modern urban culture may seem strange at first glance. After all, I don't think DMX would have appeared here if his character was meant to wear a freaking Speedo. Honestly, though, I think I prefer a wrestling game where most of the playable characters are fully clothed. Wrestling stars and those in search of street credit do actually share the same two core tenets: profitability and machismo. Both are chock full of egocentric madmen just looking for their next fight. The early 2000s brought with it no shortage of suburbanites addicted to both men in tights groping each other and hip-hop aficionados delivering tight bars over hard beats. Bring the two schools together and you've got a recipe for success. After 8 months of hard work and collaboration, as well as an exhausting amount of travel around the US and to Japan, Def Jam Vendetta released on April 1st of 2003 to positive reviews. GameSpot gave it an 8.4 and IGN an 8.9, with the game dual releasing on GameCube and PlayStation 2. A rating of T for teen was given after much debate from the ESRB, as this game does technically feature attempted murder in multiple formats. Sales numbers would soon follow, and several team members recounted being blown away once they finally did. The game went on to sell well over 1 million copies in total, a seriously solid number, especially for a somewhat niche idea. A carefully crafted marketing strategy helped boost this number, with commercials taunting you with the chance to finally flying kick Ludacris in the face. In the weeks following the launch, Def Jam and EA would host several live shows and Vendetta tournaments at GameStops around the country. Method Man also did his part, telling OK Player that in the midst of doing these shows, I would stop at GameStop and play the game with people because I was that good at it. All I had to do was host a show, and during the day I would go to different GameStops and play Def Jam Vendetta against the locals. And I did go undefeated up until one point. I think one kid beat me, that little piece of shit. As I mentioned earlier, I never got a chance to play this one when I was younger. However, I've since picked up a copy for the GameCube, and I really enjoyed my time with it. Firing it up, you're treated to a very simple menu, and of course some loud hip-hop. That's what we're here for, after all. Now, make no mistake, this thing is an arcade wrestler through and through. It's actually a clone of WWF No Mercy, and it shows. These games play extremely similarly, minus the tights. That means we're in for a whole lot of suplexes and rope breaks, and not so much of the street fighting flair the series came to be known for. It's a pretty basic fighting system, and we're limited to light and heavy strikes, light and heavy grapples, submissions, blocks, counters, and a blazing move finisher that is locked behind a sort of power meter which is not upgradable and is dictated by charisma or winning streaks. There are a few ways to end a match, ranging from a pin count to 3, a submission hold to tap out, or a knockout by depleting your opponent's health to next to nothing and either doing a ground and pound or finishing move to put them to sleep. After entering a name, the game's story mode begins with you choosing between 4 playable characters: Briggs, Proof, Spider, or Tank. I go with Briggs for this run because his outfits are hilarious. The opening cutscene sees us getting a text that his fists are needed, yeah, not his brain, just his fists, from an acquaintance. This SMS summoner turns out to be Manny, a tattoo artist and fight promoter with ties to the local criminals running an underground fighting ring for profit. Manny seems to have broken his arm either in a recent scuffle or from some no-good enforcer due to his crippling gambling addiction, so he requests that we take his place in tonight's big event. Not only that, but if we lose, he will be executed.
This is it. Now just remember, you lose, I'm taking a dirt nap.
Moving on, we're into the wrestling ring with our first opponent, Pee-wee. After defeating Pee-wee in a surprisingly challenging and long-winded battle, we take down Drake and Scarface before being treated to our first romance simulator experience. Yeah, it turns out 2 different girls really liked seeing me get punched in the face tonight. Even after verbally expressing that I'm only interested in my ex, who is now shacking up with D-Mob, the ringleader of the local fighting syndicate, they decide the way to my heart is violence and square off to decide who gets to take me, sorry, Briggs, home. A few more opponents down, and we run into D-Mob, who pulls a gun on us and tells us that we'll never get Angel back and that he's suspicious of our motives. Defeating Nore leads to another catfight and another disappointed turnaround scowl scene. Man, I sure am popular in this game. Anyway, Manny texts us to let us know he wants to make some cash without D-Mob knowing, so we compete in the local tag team tournament. These fights are fun because they can get a little chaotic when all four of you are in the ring and no one can grab the person that they meant to. You also can't pin, submit, or KO anyone to end the match unless they are the person who is actively tagged in. I found myself switching back to play as myself instead of Manny as soon as possible. One more Lady Violence session shows Ty really has what it takes to keep me around, for now. A couple of clown men and a couple of solo fights later, it's time to fight the one and only Ludacris. Not before Ty decides she's knocked out one too many ladies for me, though, and leaves me for one instead.
Jeez, let's go find a real G-spot.
See you later, chump.
So we beat Luda and his comically oversized hands and then attend the meeting D-Mob called, where he tells us that if we want the real money and respect, we'll have to beat him. And no one ever beats him. DMX is our next target to prove our worth, and to be honest, he goes down shockingly easily. We see Angel at a party and make this weird-ass face at her before D-Mob tells her it's time to go. The next night she tells us to meet her at a club, but surprise, surprise, it's an ambush instead. These three phonies attack me, but I send them running with their tails between their legs just before our partner, our brother, Manny, smashes my head with a baseball bat. Turns out he's broken up our unstoppable team on account of, well, D-Mob has a gun. The only way to get revenge on everyone and get your ex-girlfriend back? Is that seriously what this entire game is about? Is to beat all of D-Mob's henchmen in battle before taking on the big guy himself. At one point we fight Ghostface Killa, who is in fact adorned with his massive eagle bracelet statuette. However, at no point did it come alive and rip my eyes out. The next cutscene shows Angel declare she's done with D-Mob, and at this point he decides he'll just kill both of us. He pulls the gun out and takes aim, but Manny leaps to our defense right when the gun goes off, getting shot in the torso and left to die. I tackle D-Mob over the railing, and it's finally time to duke it out with the head honcho himself. His health certainly goes down slower than most, but 7 grueling minutes later we give him the old reverse pile driver, and it's time for him to take a nap. Angel decides she wants to get back together after her crime boss boyfriend tried to murder me, and I'm all for it. I mean, forgiveness is key, right? We pass by Manny, who decided to watch all of tonight's fights instead of getting any medical treatment whatsoever, and we give him the cold shoulder before turning around with a sly wink and a smile to let him know it's all good and we forgive him for viciously assaulting us. I had a lot of fun playing this title for the first time, and I think if you're a fan of arcade wrestlers and or hip-hop, you should check it out. The graphics could be better, there's no real customization with your moves or style, and at the end of the day, it is just a ladder-climbing fighter, but it's got a halfway decent story and a hell of a lot of charm. I didn't spend too much time here after I beat it, as there's no real extras, but it was great to see where this franchise got their start. Vendetta reached a bigger audience than anyone predicted, and a sequel was immediately greenlit. Why fix what isn't broken, right? Aki assumes the development helm, while the same team of producers, now positioned at EA Canada, leads production and direction. Everyone involved knew that they couldn't just make the same game again and call it a day though, so this time around they would stray from the classic wrestling formula and instead create their own fighting game mechanics that leaned more towards a brutal street fighting simulator. We also see a massive commitment to individuality in the next entry, with your playable character being fully customizable and featured in all cutscenes throughout the game. They've even added loads more of everything we loved from the first game. More characters, more finishers, more environments, more violence, and more bass. Weapons are thrown in the mix, as well as breakable environments, and there are no pin counts or rope breaks to be found, instead focusing on brutal KOs and bone breaks. This game features some real-life celebrities of the time in addition to the rappers. It also includes the aforementioned Lauren Wurtzer-Seawood as a playable character. GameSpy interviewed our main man Josh Holmes leading up to the release for Fight for New York, and when asked about the celebrity involvement in the game, he had this to say. It all comes back to creative integrity and credibility. The reason some of those games failed is that they were opportunistic marketing ploys with no credible creative vision behind the product. Rather than looking to sell our game based solely on the celebrity involvement, we approach the game in the same way you would approach a film with a great ensemble cast. The talent involved enhances the property, but it still needs to be able to stand on its own feet creatively. If you've got a really great interactive experience and you wrap that in a credible world with a compelling story, then hopefully you should have a big success on your hands. Later, he comments on whether this is a fighting game or a wrestling game, stating, Def Jam Fight for New York mixes elements from both and should appeal to both audiences for different reasons. It has the fluid responsiveness and directed controls of a fighting game and incorporates the free movement and grappling elements associated with wrestling games. It's a deep fighting experience, but we concentrate more on the strategy of the fight rather than the complex button combos. Our focus has been in creating a fast, fun fighting experience with some really brutal moves. Needless to say, he delivered on these promises, and just a year and a half after the first game, in September of 2004, Def Jam Fight for New York was released to praises from both critics and consumers. GameSpot gave it an 8.7, calling it a different brand of game altogether, and IGN's Hillary Goldstein also gave it an 8.7, while stating that there's a great sense of fun, of true enjoyment in the development of Fight for New York, and that translates to the game. This entry escalated the rating to M for mature, likely due to their unwillingness to compromise on the immersive story they'd built. This time releasing on all three major home consoles of the era, it went on to be the best-selling game in the series, capping off at almost 2 million copies sold in its lifetime. It's not hard to see why, as this entry boasts a roster of nearly 70 fighters, 32 songs, 24 maps, 23 fighting styles, and 9 match types with differing environmental factors, along with a seemingly endless supply of merchandise and jewelry. This game is absolutely loaded with content. It struggles to reach a consistent frame rate on any console, but I am more than willing to accept that to enjoy one of my most nostalgic games of all time. I played this game so much as a kid, it took me hours of retrying to beat each battle, and every cutscene I unlocked felt like a new episode of a hotly anticipated series on TV. I remember racing home from school to play this one, just to see what would happen on more than one occasion. I only knew a couple artists from the game, either because they were still on the radio at the time, or I had seen them in TV or movies, but that didn't stop me from connecting with the fact that they were real people. Not some weirdo in a costume, not some anime mock-up, but regular dudes getting absolutely pummeled. If you get damaged in a fight, you even get cuts and bruises, which leads to every blow having gravity. This game also introduced me to some stellar tunes, featuring tracks like Bust by Outkast and Killer Mike, and Nuff Respect by Big Daddy Kane, completely uncensored, which went a long way towards sparking my interest in rap music. Sitting at the title screen bumping jams evokes the memories of sitting at my original Xbox and carefully reading each song title so I could recognize the artist when I beat them up later. This one launches with an insane intro sequence showing every ne'er-do-well in the city joining up and walking together like zombies when the apocalypse starts. It culminates with two different gangs facing each other, seemingly ready for war, with one side led by the antagonist of the first game, D-Mob, again voiced by Christopher Judge, and the other side led by Snoop Dogg, who we will soon learn is a high-ranking crime lord named Crow in this universe. I launched the story mode and am pleasantly surprised to see this one actually picks up right where the last one left off. D-Mob is arrested for shooting Manny and terrorizing the local thugs during the opening credits, when all of a sudden the cops carrying him are T-boned by an SUV and the unknown driver helps D-Mob escape. We get a fun character creator posed as a police sketch of the driver, and I make a large angry man ready to take on the world. We get D-Mob to the safe house where we find Sticky Fingers and Method Man as his signature character Blaze, gaming down and eating pizza while Redman sleeps. D-Mob explains that while they were relaxing, I saved him, and we get thrown into the tutorial to make sure we can handle ourselves. After learning the basics of fighting, including the new and improved blazing move system, we get told to buy some new gear and hide out at a secret apartment they've provided us with. We hit the round of shops made available to us in this game, including a clothing store that's highly sus, a gym run by Henry Rollins of Black Flag fame, where we'll train our stats and learn new moves, Jacob the Jeweler Arabo's diamond shop, a tattoo parlor run by Manny from the first game, who seems to have healed up nicely, and Stingray the barber if you need a new fade. We get all swagged out in our early 2000s best and head to the Foundation Club for our first circuit of fights. Each venue faces you off against a few characters created for the game and leads into a boss fight with a real-life rapper or celebrity. We take on the first few chumps and then knock out Omar Epps as his ever-so-creative alter ego, OE. D-Mob congratulates us, and it's time for our first boss fight against Ice-T. Honestly, a decent challenge here, as Ice-T can reverse or parry lots of strikes and grapples. The next cutscene introduces us officially to Crow and his two highest-ranking soldiers, Fat Joe as Crack and Danny Trejo as, well, Danny Trejo. Crow tells us he plans to take over every fight club in the city, and that if we want to make a name for ourselves, Crack should be our first real challenge. He then tells all the local club goers that his game is the only high-paying one in town.
Thanks for the hospitality. See you soon.
I head to the limit for our next group of fights, and we get treated to our first love interest decision in the game. We have 4 options for a girlfriend here, including Cindy J, Kimura, Lil Kim, and Shauna. After making our decision, we're confronted by 9 from the last venue, who claims that's actually his girlfriend. We stop him and get the girl before facing off against Danny Trejo for the limit finale. After beating Trejo, Blaze tells us our faction is in trouble as Crow and his gang are taking over way too many of our clubs in the city. I join the first leg of the free-for-all tournament to prove our crew is the best before heading Club Babylon for our next tour. Babylon honestly looks and feels just like the limit, and I think they could have done more to innovate here. Eventually, we're tasked with deciding between our current girlfriend and Carmen freaking Electra. Obviously, I picked Carmen, and Kimura is none too pleased with this call, duking it out for the rights to take me home. Next, we see a team meeting of sorts where D-Mob's crew is plotting on how to stop Crow from stealing all of their clubs and credit. Sticky Fingers wants to go in guns blazing, but D-Mob in all his wisdom encourages them to be patient and take the clubs back one at a time. We tackle Babylon, including our ex's new man in the hilarious Sean Paul.
Yo, wagwan youth. You play with fire, you know. So pack it up before you get burned, pussy. Alright, to get lucky, but you see next time, 6 feet deep, brethren.
I add a new fighting style to my roster before heading to our next spot, the Dragon House. A few quick wins leads us to the Red Room for a big fight against WC. Crow confronts us afterwards to say this war is costing us both way too much money and we need to settle this with a solo fight. Winner gets all the clubs we've been fighting for, and the loser leaves New York City for good.
Loser goes to Jersey.
The fighters will be Crow's top man Crack against D-Mob's top man, us? Yeah, so apparently Crack had already beat Blaze recently, and D-Mob trusts us over Sticky Fingers, who is downright pissed to hear this news and defects to the other side. We show up to fight Crack at Crow's best venue, Club Murder, with the top members of both gangs there to observe and respect the outcome. All seems well after beating Crack, and D-Mob gifts us a new chain, declaring us family, when all of a sudden a car pulls up next to us and Trejo opens fire on us through the window and proceeds to run us off the road. We chase Crow's henchmen from the vehicle down into the subway like we've got a death wish and find Trejo ready to fulfill that wish, only to be out of ammo and have to resort to using his fists. This venue features a constantly running subway train that will end the match if you get in the way. We beat up Trejo while the other perps escape and find D-Mob still lying in the street above the platform. He reminds us to be patient and wise and insists we leave him there to be arrested by the oncoming police force. After forming a plan with Blaze and Redman, we get a message from Crow that he has the upper hand and we should quit while we're alive. I take on the second portion of the free-for-all tournament and then head into the Chop Shop for a special tag team tournament with a brand new Escalade as the prize. Busta Rhymes as Magic gives us a hard time at the door, and we have to pick a teammate for the night. I decide to rock with OE as my partner, much to the chagrin of Ice-T, who swears vengeance on me for not picking him. We tear through the contest, even pulling off some of the moves that involve us both, and finish off the night with a fight against Magic and Ice-T, who are furious to see us win. Another free-for-all bout done, and it's time to tackle the Terror Dome. Next, we head to the power plant on our quest for new territory to call our own. Then there's the Gauntlet, which leads to a standoff between us and Magic, who tells us to quit messing with Crow or he'll kill us. We don't take kindly to that, and we have our first car damage match, where we aim to destroy our opponent's vehicle. Crow reaffirms that he's looking to kill us, and Magic is pissed about his car, but we keep on fighting the good fight until Crow offers to team up and invites us to come discuss the possibility. This conversation happens at our bout with Exhibit, and Crow tries again to persuade us to switch teams. We refuse and take down the 7th Heaven Club ring next before finishing the free-for-all series with a bang, which gives us access to the one-on-one tournament series. This one ends with us fighting our mentor, Henry Rollins himself, who is a seriously tough beat. We join the Heights venue to destroy the local hooligans while D-Mob warns us to stay away from Crow. Put the beat down on Prodigy and you're thrown into a cutscene that shows Crow ambushing you at your place with his new frontman, Magic and that asshole Sticky Fingers that switch sides. He tells us that he has kidnapped Carmen Electra, our girlfriend if you forgot, and that in order to earn her back we have to start fighting for him and take all the clubs back in his name. D-Mob is rightfully pissed to see me representing the ops, but Blaze honestly just seems hurt. We embark on fighting through all the same venues as before, although this time with the opposing motive and enemy list. The final club that needs taking is 357, with the frontman being Redman as his character Doc. Blaze tells us our loyalty meant nothing from the beginning, and Crow tells us we have one more job to do before he'll let us see Carmen. We begrudgingly join Crack to do this final job, and we pull up to the junkyard to find Blaze has been beaten senseless at the hands of Magic and is lying there vulnerable. Everything snaps into focus as we realize that the last job we're expected to do to save our girlfriend is killing our closest friend with a baseball bat and leaving his dead body in the junkyard. That simply won't do, and instead we turn the bat on Crack and Magic before Blaze musters the strength to put the smackdown on them with me. We beat the knowledge out of Magic that Carmen is being held at the old tire factory in Brooklyn, but he also says she's as good as dead. When we show up to the tire factory, Sticky Fingers has Carmen tied up and he monologues his way into lighting the whole place on fire for some kind of kamikaze showdown. Somehow we make it out of the burning ring of fire with Carmen in hand just before Crow shows up with his entire posse. He laughs us off, claiming we could never take on the whole crew with just the two of us. Blaze is already injured anyhow, but my team must have gotten word that I'm no longer a traitor because they show up in full effect. We're still a few guys short, but that works itself out when some of Crow's guys switch sides on the spot to join us. After sneaking up to Crow's safe house room, Magic puts a gun to our head, and right before he pulls the trigger, he has a change of heart and leaves us the gun.
Hey, yo, you know what? Fuck this shit. It's all yours.
Crow desperately pleads with us, even trying to convince us to run the city together, but even he knows we are past that. We shoot the whole clip next to Crow because while I might be a violent criminal, I am not a murderer, and decide to let the whole thing go. We turn around to walk away, and Crow takes the opportunity to attempt to stab us with the hidden blade in his cane. A fight ensues, and this time the environment is very important as the main wall is lined with breakable windows that spill out into the street several floors below. I take advantage of the windows and throw Snoop D-O-double-G to his D-double-O-M, and the city is ours. Blaze shows up just after I handled everything by myself to give us our chain and get us out of there before the cops show up and the credits roll. Unlike Vendetta, this game had me hooked even after beating the main story. There's no shortage of fun to be had in custom battles, and there's a lot more versatility when it comes to making every fight feel new and fun. I truly could not get enough of throwing semi-famous people out of windows and into oncoming trains in this one. There's no wrong time to take part in a flaming deathmatch between Snoop Dogg and Carmen Electra after all. We're treated to a shallow extras menu this time around, featuring the ability to enter cheat codes and even watch full-length trailer for Soul Plane. Okay, while these extras aren't the most exciting, I did pump endless hours into this game as a kid for the core features on offer. There really is no other fighting system like this one, even if it did have its imitators. I'm looking at you, Backyard Wrestling, and this is the only game I was better than my friends at simply because they didn't own it. I think the story is engaging and well written, and it was my first exposure to a main protagonist turning heel that I can remember. The general public seems to agree with my sentiment for this game, as it is still being brought up constantly as the next contender for a remake or remaster. It was also featured in a competitive light in 2022, 2023, and 2024 when CEO Tournament added it to their live streamed lineup. Unfortunately, there's no modern way to play this game, and physical copies can cost a boatload. I'm truly lucky to have held on to my copy, but this entry in the series is worth every damn penny. I cannot recommend it enough to any hip-hop heads with even the slightest interest in fighters. The wild success of Def Jam Fight for New York would lead most to believe a star-studded sequel was on the way with upgrades to every mechanic in sight, right? Wrong. The next project on offer was actually a downgrade in almost every conceivable way. A handheld port of Fight for New York exclusive to the PlayStation Portable, with some modified content and a prequel story set before both previous games. Don't get me wrong, as a PSP lover, I was ecstatic to pick this one up in a used game store a couple years after it released, but a brand new set of fighters and levels would have been strongly preferred. Either way, the usual suspects at Aki and EA Canada nailed this much shorter experience, and the fluidity of their street fighting brawler translated nicely to the on-the-go format, with a few caveats. The single joystick on the original PSP did lead some to having a tough time managing their movement and directional attacks, and I don't blame them. But it didn't stop me from locking in and mastering this runt of the litter and having a heck of a lot of fun doing so. Most of the venues and artists we remember from the last entry are on display here, with a few cut for the sake of performance and fitting everything on that old UMD shell. Animated voice cutscenes have also been done away with, replaced with narrations and shuffling illustrations, text messages, and unvoiced event transcriptions to ascertain the lore from. Def Jam Fight for New York The Takeover released on August 29th of 2006 to mostly positive reviews, garnering an 8.1 and an 8 out of 10 from IGN and GameSpot respectively. Starting this one up lands us in Bed-Stuy with Manny narrating our core story from some time in the near future. He claims we're the type of person who would rather work hard than sell drugs, and that even though he was a stranger, we still saved him one night by beating up a crooked cop named Jervis that was assaulting and hassling him. This heroic action leads Manny to offer us a spot in the local underground fight clubs, making a lot more money than we ever could at our uncle's mechanic shop. I refuse, but soon enough that jerk Jervis starts harassing us too and actually gets us fired from our job with our uncle. Now unemployed, we're left with no choice but to agree to fighting for Manny for some quick cash. We're treated to the same character creator from the last game, and I go even bigger and better this time around. Henry Rollins will once again train us to be the baddest brutalizer in the county, and after creating our character and selecting a fighting style, we get a text telling us to head to the Dragon House for our first official fight and to prove ourselves to our newly appointed local OG. I did get ringed out to Chang on my first try, assuming it's no big deal, but soon find out there are actually no retries against any of the base level opponents, and we have to accept our first big fight as a big fat L. OG doesn't seem to mind though, and says we're in the club despite our shameful evening. This game ditches the traditional fight X people at X venue before moving on to the next venue formula, and instead opts for a system of texting you locations where story-altering events are taking place and expecting you to show up and save the day. It also breaks down the map by neighborhoods instead of just being a scrollable list of available fights, which doesn't feel as smooth. Anyway, Ice-T needs our help at the garage, so we handle business for him before OG sends us on a few errands of his own. After seeking revenge for various troubles, including car accidents, mixtapes dominating the wrong neighborhoods, and casual muggings, as well as keeping the cops after us at bay, we eventually start making pretty good cash. We've also garnered a name for ourselves, so we head to the Dragon House to prove that we're the best brawler in town. Now that we're number one, the owner of the Dragon House introduces himself as the legendary D-Mob. Now, back in this time period, D-Mob was just a club owner with high ambitions who had been around the scene for some time. He claims the only way to the top, though, is to form a solid crew and turn your backroom brawls into a proper business. Your OG warned you that D-Mob was a power-hungry and dangerous guy, but you couldn't resist the opportunity for more respect and power yourself. We start fighting for him, and eventually a lot of the locals get jealous of our stature. After a few bouts at Babylon, we learn that our OG has been shot dead in the street with no one around to defend him. D-Mob says we need to use this anger as motivation for avenging OG's death, and even tells us who was behind it in the first place: Crow. Now, Crow is already a deadly gangster boss as depicted in Fight for New York, so we need to exercise patience and strategy if we want to get back at him. Beating Crack nets us the title of new OG for all of the local fighters not already fighting in Crow's name. As the newly appointed OG, we're given details on one of the many new mechanics offered, choosing your own crew to help dominate the streets. These crew members can even stand in for you if you don't feel like your fighting style is good against the current opponent or if your health is running low. Although that never seems to be an issue, and I just use my custom character as much as possible. We also get the return of Angel as an up-and-coming artist and your main love interest for this story. New map, The Bunker, is just as exciting as it appears, and we learn that D-Mob is profiting more than all of us from our hard work. Angel is implied to be using us as a pawn to leverage herself more power in the industry. Eventually, D-Mob gives us the go-ahead to go after Crow, but warns us that him and his crew are not easily defeated. We rescue our girlfriend from a kidnapping attempt, this series loves that plot point, and take down all of New York's best fighters, sans Crow, who is waiting for us at his garage. We fight Crow at the garage, and to be honest, I still don't understand why they didn't have this fight at the safe house like in Fight for New York. It is implied that he already had his empire, and the window match location is literally in the game, but we're stuck fighting the main villain in a venue we've already been to a dozen times. The window match location actually never gets used in the main story, which is a damn shame if you ask me, as it created a thrilling climax in Fight for New York. So we defeat Crow and head to the bar to celebrate our ownership of the city with D-Mob, only for him to tell us our partnership has come to an end and we need to take the fall. Starks and Jervis show up, leaving us no time to respond, and our crew ditches us as fast as they can. Luckily, Manny has our back, though, and clues us in on the fact that D-Mob has been setting us up this entire time. Gone are the illusions of running the city together, replaced with a thirst for vengeance, as he goes on to tell us that D-Mob ordered the hit on our OG, and that he has been controlling the police presence all along. He's also banging our girlfriend Angel, although she is still feeding information to Manny in an attempt to help us. After defeating Starks and Jervis one by one, we're faced against D-Mob himself in the underground subway location, and I'm happy to see that the train is still running, even with every other conceivable downgrade along the way. We put the hurting on D-Mob, and our narrator explains that after all we've learned from running the city and being betrayed by everyone we loved, we want no part in the street life anymore. We walk away from the life of the hustler, likely a little richer and a little more jaded. I had a blast replaying this one, as it really dialed in on the look and feeling of the main game they were porting. Being able to play a fine-tuned version of Fight for New York in the palm of my hands and on the go was a game changer, and I spent a few great car rides duking it out with Rap's toughest warriors. This is far from the definitive way to play this game, though, as it is missing several key features and shows a shocking lack of innovation, especially when considering that the development timeline was similar to both previous entries. Josh Holmes was not present for the development of this title, departing the studio very shortly after the release of Fight for New York. I think this results in a feeling that the remaining team was largely on autopilot for this entry, not changing enough and labeling it as a port in the end rather than its own release. Limited soundtrack, less characters, no cutscenes, and an equally insane resale price means that this one doesn't have much to offer if the home console version is an option. We have the same extras as before, with the inclusion of a concept art gallery that gifted us this timeless classic photo of David Banner and a hard portrait of Trejo as well. We did get one piece of cut content reinstated in this game, though, with the inclusion of the venue terminal offload that was originally planned to be in the second game. I really respect this port, and I got a lot of playtime out of it when I was younger, not so much now that I see it as a less fun version of Fight for New York, though. Highly recommend checking this one out if you're looking for PSP hidden gems, as it functions great for what it is. Nearly 4 years after the fully fleshed out title, with the 7th generation of consoles making a splash in living rooms across the world, fans of this bombastic series were clamoring for a real, official sequel to the best-selling PS2 and Xbox juggernaut that was Fight for New York. Said fans would surely be excited by the announcement of a new entry in the franchise, but not so excited to learn it was heading in a completely different direction with a completely different team of people at the helm. Josh Holmes was long gone from the team at EA by now, however he did still find great success elsewhere as he went on to become creative director for Halo 4, among other impressive credits. Official trailers revealed that this new Def Jam game would still follow the formula of street fighting infused with hip-hop and real-life rappers, but would be canning the reliable old Aki engine in favor of EA Chicago's Fight Night Round 3 engine, and handing production and creative control over to that team as well, with Kudo Sonoda as the vice president and general manager. Kudo had worked his way up the industry from Hotline Helper to showing off his shoes on the big stage.
You ever wonder what the bottom of an Avatar shoe looks like? Well, bam! There it is.
He'd be joined by Mutant Football alum and veteran producer Michael Mentheim, and together with EA Chicago and the new team at Def Jam, they'd build their own interpretation of Josh and Daryl's original vision. EA Chicago was in a bit of a transitional state at the time, as they were not only moving their entire office, but replacing the vast majority of their staff members as Kudo's brave new world began to take shape. Kudo is a bit of an eccentric and certainly outspoken leader, and when asked about his changing corporate climate in a summer 2005 game developer interview, he had this to say. Often developers don't want to hire people with no game experience, but I'd much rather have someone who can learn and adapt and figure stuff out than somebody that has 10 years of doing something the same way and that's their only experience. People have a way of doing things, and they tend to apply that to a new situation. We've hired tons of people from the movie industry, from advertising, from different kinds of creative fields that aren't games. And the perspective they put on how a person experiences a game versus how they play the game has just been huge, defining how next-gen games are played. Only a little bit of foreshadowing there. He also doesn't seem all too invested in the Def Jam series, clearly prioritizing Fight Night when he says, besides working on the Fight Night stuff that we do, we're working on that Def Jam fighting game, and then we've got a couple of unannounced fighting games that we're working on too. The studio is really growing fast. Almost like he doesn't even know or care what it is or turns out to be. In a February 2007 interview with Shaq News' David Craddock, just weeks before the game released, Kudo was asked about the changes to the established controls and moves, stating, the right analog stick is used for the huge directional strikes and our grab and throw mechanics. We decided to put more attacking and combat abilities on the right stick, not because of Fight Night Round 3, but because this was the most intuitive control setup for Def Jam Icon. We do not use any on-screen health bars that you see in older generations of games. All of our health indicators you can see right on the game characters via cuts, bruising, blood, and procedural animations. That last part ended up being a lie, as these extremely ugly health bars that take up half the screen are on by default when launching the game, and I don't know about you, but it seems to me that the most intuitive control setup for any established fighting franchise would be the one that it had already established. Regardless of any hiccups that may or may not have occurred along the development cycle, Def Jam Icon, released in March of 2007, this time met with mixed reviews across fans and critics alike. IGN's Jeff Haynes gave it a 6.7, citing the game's weak fighting moves, lackluster story mode, and inconsistent game mechanics, while GameSpot gave it an 8.1 and praised it a bit more. It's easy to see why loyal fans were unhappy with this entry, as they have not only cut down significantly on the number of characters, songs, moves, and venues available, but also done away entirely with blazing moves in favor of increased damage from environmental hazards. These hazards are also no longer based on crowd involvement or weapons, but instead focused mainly on the song that is playing while you fight. The environments start caving in around you, and most are completely destroyed by the time the fight finishes. There are also explosions and broken equipment to watch out for, but the main threat is whatever speaker is emitting the biggest bass drops. You do have some input here, though, as you have a new set of moves labeled DJ controls, which allow you to trigger the hazards I just mentioned by either scratching up a remix or changing the song entirely. When your song is playing, you're slightly faster and stronger, so it's not just the nostalgia or the beats that matter here. I picked this one up in my first year of owning a PS3, and I noticed right away that it was a downgrade compared to the previous entries. I wasn't impressed by its attempt at HD graphics, strange color filter, or its complete lack of over-the-top fun the series had come to be known for. I was also ready for a change of scenery, hoping for a new city to pillage, but this one is set in New York just like the rest of them. This is likely because this town was the breeding ground for all things Def Jam, including its inception, but I'd still like to see another metropolitan area be explored as the center of the drama at some point. That's not to say I was completely disappointed, though, as this game did feature a lot of rappers that were on the radio frequently at the time, like Lil Jon, Paul Wall, T.I., Mike Jones, and Young Jeezy, in addition to a few legacy characters like Meth, Red, Ghost, and Sticky Fingers as Wink. While Kevin Liles was no longer president of Def Jam Records, he was still the lead consultant when it came to all things interactive due to his love for games. He would make his return here, contributing various story beats in addition to voicing the lead mentor of the game. I wasn't opposed to the larger-than-life storyline on offer here that felt more out of Hollywood than the underground American slums, but it didn't sit quite right with me either, even when I was much younger. This game names its story mode Build a Label, and selecting this option puts us directly into the character creator with no fun explanation or motivation. I craft this absolute unit of a man, including choosing the first song we'll fight to and one of only 2 available fighting styles, and we hop into our first cutscene. 2 kids recognize some famous guy named Curtis Carver, voiced by Kevin Liles, and ask for an autograph while we chat with him. He gives them some cash, and next thing you know, Curtis is shot dead in the street. Cut to 2 years earlier, and we're making our way through a crowded club when some jerk walks into us, spilling our drink on us, and says he's ready to fight. The base attacks in this game are extremely underwhelming, and we soon learn to utilize the DJ controls in conjunction with our environment to damage our opponent. Eventually his health bar is depleted, and the fight ends with no real pomp or fanfare. Curtis seeks us out to tell us he likes what he saw out there and asks us what our life is like. Curtis is clearly rich and well-connected, and after telling him we're homeless at the moment, he sets us up with a run-down apartment and some cash to get us started on our way to success. I spend a little time getting to know the new interface and visiting the local shops before going out on Curtis's first mission for us, stifling a crazed fan that has been stalking Ludacris. We head to the second map available, which is a recreation of the actual studio set from BET's 106 & Park, and put the beat down on that stalker. Luda is grateful for our help and tells us he needs another favor as some member of the paparazzi has been harassing him, but I decide to help Mr. Carver out first. He is my boss after all. Curtis needs us to collect some cash from a crooked promoter as a favor to Mike Jones so that he'll consider joining our label. Here we see the game's third venue, which consists of a classic one-story house in an urban or suburban neighborhood with a couple of highly volatile cars out front. A couple errands later, we meet up with our first love interest of the game, but after a subtle warning from Carver, we keep our distance instead of pursuing any lady that's willing to go home with us. Carver was so impressed with our abilities to mitigate the everyday struggles of a label representative that he offers us a cut of Ludacris's new single while simultaneously sending us on several more jobs. We decide which assets to spend the song's budget on, allocating between marketing, cost of goods, airplay, and PR appearances. Next, we have our first major choice in the game of which artist assigned to the label we're creating. It's not made explicitly clear, but if you pick the Mike Jones errand, you'll sign him, and vice versa for E40. I picked E40, and I'm tasked with defeating a highly intoxicated Lil Jon in order to sign him. BET News announces after the fight that E40 will in fact be signing to Curtis's new label and working on new music immediately. We choose E40's royalty percentage and take note of his happiness rating displayed over the swarm of messages everyone sends you between fights. These incessant messages are usually asking for favors in the form of gifts for the producers and artists' families, or in some cases just outright asking for money. Mr. Carver wants us to meet him at the club to celebrate our first artist signing, but we're soon interrupted by freaking Kangaroo Jack's best friend. Yeah, so for some reason Anthony Anderson got involved in this game, portraying Troy Dalla, a competing label manager and longtime frenemy of Curtis Carver.
When was the last album y'all dropped, huh? What was that, like 1986? I forget how old you are.
Troy talks some smack and tells us we should work for him instead of Curtis. The next section of the game, as well as other large portions, feature a shocking lack of cutscenes, and all of the main story events are exposited to you through text and voicemails. Essentially, though, we're just settling petty beefs in the rap world and pursuing artists to join our label, all while Troy is trying to steal them from us. It turns out one of our artists has some bars being leaked, so we go to shut up the local DJ promoting the mixtapes. We then see the gas station featured in the demo, and this one even has a store owner shooting a fire extinguisher at you as one of the hazards, in addition to one of those car wash spinny wheel things that comes down and launches you for some reason. We unlock a new fighting style, Street Kwon-Do, the third of 5 fighting styles that are eventually available. Mike Jones is pissed we didn't pick him for our labels, so we meet him at the club and teach him not to disrespect us. E40 beefs with Paul Wall, culminating in us fighting as E40 at the neighborhood map to settle the score. The next artist choice is between Jim Jones and Ghostface Killah. I go with Ghost for old time's sake, and our label produces a major single for him. Big Boy threatens to diss Carver on stage, and after silencing him, Troy is extra mad as Big Boy is one of his top artists. Troy invites us over to his penthouse to reveal to all of us that Wink is responsible for the leaked music after he shared it with some family members, and offers us the opportunity to teach him a lesson about copyright law. Carver makes us vice president for our heroic action, and next thing you know, we have a penthouse apartment of our own to call home. I always loved the design of this apartment when I was younger, as it is just the right amount of spacious and cozy. I've always enjoyed living in small, open spaces, and this luxurious estate in the sky exemplifies that in style. Not everyone is thrilled about our big promotion, though, as Wink and Troy are leaving vaguely threatening messages on our voicemail. We also start getting text from an unknown sender initially warning us that E40 has angered some off-duty cop and needs to stop making trouble. After signing our final artist, T.I., we run into our old flame from the old neighborhood, Patricia, now going by Platinum and trying to make a name for herself in the music industry. We've been keeping our ear to the street and try to blast her for sleeping with Troy in an effort to get to the top. She assures us, though, that he's just a manager and friend, and we slink off to my beautiful new abode for the night. Add another person to the extensive list of pests, texting us begging for thousands every day, I guess. Carver warns us that we need to settle the drama with the off-duty cop before it gets too serious, and our unknown helper cues us into the fact that Ghost may be flying into LA for a trap set up by Troy Dalla, which is then confirmed by Ghost, who says he's already flying out. The game stops by to chat about how we picked T.I. over him, and we completely obliterate my fancy new apartment during our standoff. E40 and T.I. hate each other, which plummets both of their happiness ratings, but what can I do? Nothing. Carver tells us to lay low in the dorms, which is what he lovingly calls the slump he originally had us in, to get back to our roots, while he helps rebuild our estate. A couple of detectives approach me and Luda as we contemplate our success and gives us a very hard time, telling us that they run the city and we need to keep our fistfights and nefarious activity far, far away, assaulting us in the process. Carver tells us this cop is named Wheatley, and he has a long and storied history of harassing anyone trying to make legitimate money in the city, but especially us. The game wants to fight T.I., E40 actually does fight that cop he's been beefing with, landing himself in jail, and we don't know what to do about it. We get a random SIM chip in the mail, and Luda tells us to see what they want carefully. Wheatley gets our number and starts harassing us virtually too. We meet up with Platinum Patty again, and she tells us Detective Wheatley is on Troy Dalla's payroll, and that's why he turns a blind eye to their wrongdoings while pursuing us like it's their job. Little John and T.I. duke it out in the freshly unlocked helicopter rooftop level, and something about this battle really works as a showcase towards when this game can be fun. There's a ton of obstacles to avoid or aim your opponent towards, and playing as the artist of the songs while they desperately try to reinstate their own anthems adds a sense of urgency and drama to the mix. The unknown sender lets us know that Wheatley's street-level informant is none other than Wink. I guess Sticky Fingers is just destined to be a shady traitor at this point. We shut down the revenge mission aimed at T.I., and all of the tension between the two labels starts bubbling to the surface. My artists, boss, and enemies are all upset with how I'm handling things, and both sides are taking drastic measures to right the ship. Our friend Gooch starts texting us saying he's in town, and this later turns out to be Method Man's entry into the story. Carver is being targeted by the federal government for money laundering and hiding profit, and he's worried they're going to disappear him like the local hip-hop urban legend figurehead Rush, so we asked to meet up and debate the topic. The next cutscene is all too familiar, but this time we're privy to the conversation at hand, which consists of Curtis preaching how powerful we are, and how powerful we could be if we start making the right moves and silence our opposition. After encouraging us to start making some big moves, Curtis is gunned down by a car that had circled the block just moments after seeing us talking. We're immediately surrounded by Wheatley and his partner, who slam us on a car and claim they saw us shoot Carver, even going so far as to say they registered the gun in our name themselves. We break free and run away to collect our things at home, greeted by an extended BET news segment, which implies that the entire community now believes we are responsible for the death of record mogul Curtis Carver. Our friends, artists, and girlfriends all text us to let us know they're cutting ties with us for the cold-blooded crime we didn't commit. Greer breaks into our penthouse to burn it down for the 4th time this story mode, and we take him down before fleeing to the dorms where Gooch has finally tracked us down. P also turns up to confront us about killing Carver, and we explain to both of them that we are going on a Rambo-style revenge mission against Troy and Wheatley to clear our name. They tell us it's a suicide mission, but we head out anyway, and our first fight is actually as Gooch, shutting up Paul Wall once and for all. P warns us that Troy is likely onto us, and this turns out to be true, as he soon gets our secret number and invites us over for what I anticipate to be the final fight of the game. Troy monologues about how wrong we've done him, stealing his clients and his girl, and denies having any involvement with the police that have been making our lives a living hell. We call Troy fat and beat him up after he threatens to murder us, but Wheatley shows up and makes good on that threat. Wheatley shoots me in the face and actually shoots Troy too, framing the whole thing as another murder I'd committed before he saved the day by killing me. Greer and Wheatley bury us alive after somehow surviving the headshot, and just before our vision is completely covered by dirt, we look up to see that Platinum has been in on it the whole time, being comforted by Wheatley while we are wasting away. We black out with death on our mind, but Gooch shows up just in time to dig us out and take us to an underground doctor and plastic surgeon. The doctor tells us we're lucky to be alive, and in one of the strangest twists I've seen in any game, we're plunged back into the character creator for a second go. Don't get it twisted though, this is not a new game plus, but just a way of justifying your comeback and perhaps prolonging the underwhelming story mode, and as soon as we're done, it's right back to business. A BET newsreel plays, stating that we are the primary suspect in the murder of both Troy Dalla and Curtis Carver while we're still at large. Gooch goes out on the town looking for information while I heal up, and whoops, they forgot to change his name back from Method Man on this victory screen. The newscaster tells us that Platinum has assumed control of both labels with fallen CEOs, pulling the strings behind the scenes the entire time to gain power. She plans to merge both labels and name the company after herself, monopolizing New York hip-hop along the way. We finish healing just in time to debut our new face to Russell Simmons, playing the character Rush here, who was a local hip-hop guru who had to shy away from the big time after being targeted by those same corrupt cops and executives that led to our downfall. See, Rush actually paid for our entire surgery and reveals he has been our unknown contact that sent the SIM chip and helped us all those times before. Rush tells us to start over and turn a new leaf, but Gooch confesses that he had recorded the entire encounter that put us in the hospital and tells us to seek revenge by using the tape. We fight Wink under our new secret identity in order to get a meeting with Platinum. Confronting Platinum, she can feel something is off, almost like she used to know us once upon a time.
Have we met before?
But she allows us to continue the meeting when we ruin the vibe by playing the tape that clearly shows Wheatley is corrupt and responsible for multiple homicides. Even after all this treachery, we still propose that in order to hush the tape, we should be made the third partner of the massive label. I know this wasn't a realistic pitch, but it's crazy we would even entertain the idea of being partners with the man who shot us. Wheatley doesn't go for it though, breaking our tape and dispatching Greer to make us spill who made the tape. We defeat Greer and head up to the rooftop where Wheatley is immediately ready to fight. I expected some kind of grand finale deathmatch here, but it's just the normal helicopter map and no added mechanics at all. Defeating Wheatley nets us a cutscene of Platinum tripping and falling off the roof for seemingly no reason at all, holding on to the leads just beneath the helipad for dear life. She apologizes for her villainous behavior, and we seem to like what we're hearing, but Wheatley gets up and shoots her right in the back while we're distracted. We square up and beat the shit out of Wheatley again in an identical battle, testing the limits of how long they can stretch this out for. We cradle Platty Pats as she drifts to eternal sleep, and then cut to celebrating our victories in some private club. Apparently, we're now the CEO of Platinum Records, and no one knows about our shady past or all the accusations against our former identity. A voicemail plays over top of the footage that sets up a hypothetical sequel, with the senator demanding that the leftover corrupt cops investigate who we are, pitching an infinite budget to infiltrate our operation. The credits roll and we return to our penthouse with absolutely nothing left to do. As a teenager, I played this one just long enough to beat the story mode before putting it down for good until this replay. I never got a chance to try the long-since defunct online mode, and this was never anyone's first pick for a couch fighter, but I don't think either would have significantly improved my opinion of it. This entry, much like the first, has no extras to play around with either. Other than Versus mode, we have only one other game mode, Beatings with Bass. Beatings with Bass is just a Versus mode without any DJ controls, so it's not really a different mode at all. Hazards do a little extra damage here too, though, and they're only triggered when the bass bumps heavy or the beat changes in the song itself, lacking any playable character control over the music. Believe it or not, I actually prefer this limited game mode as it removes the clunky layer of musical input and focuses on knowing the songs and fighting the fights. The game likely would have been better off if they had went with this style of gameplay, and all signs point towards the DJ controls being a fairly late addition to the development cycle. I did also test out those controversial health bars a few times, and good God are they ugly. Even though the cuts and bruises Kudo mentioned do exist, they're not noticeable or high definition enough to ascertain any information from. They did decide to rapidly and harshly change the color palettes when you're low on health, though, which was more than enough to encourage me to skip the health bars entirely for this playthrough. It bothered me that you can throw your opponent halfway across the map like you have super strength. I don't understand why they couldn't have made the maps just a little smaller and had the throw distance be slightly less ridiculous. It's almost like everything that was meant to be an improvement or innovation in this title ended up as a knock against it instead. Even saying this game was polarizing would be a compliment, as fans at the time and still today agree that everything it decided to change about the beloved franchise had a negative impact on the overall product. When asked about his time working on Icon in a 2014 interview with Complex Magazine, Michael Mentheim clearly recognizes the negativity surrounding the game, stating that the biggest problem with the title is that we didn't stay true to the previous titles. We let down some fans of Def Jam Vendetta and some of the fans of Def Jam Fight for New York. We tried to innovate too much. It was an existing brand with an existing fan base that was in love with the previous games. If you look at something like Mortal Kombat, they don't really change the mechanics of that game. Unfortunately, we didn't do that on Def Jam Icon. It wasn't so much that we looked at the old title and saw we could get rid of, though. Everything was more of creating this buildings with bass, and we had a limited timeline to get the product out. The other problem was that while the positives with buildings with bass and art direction were very fantastic, they didn't lend themselves well to the core gameplay mechanics. When you have these super realistic characters and animations, which work great for Fight Night as a boxing sim, it doesn't work for a fighting game because it isn't fast enough. One of the biggest knocks on the product were the sluggish fighting controls. I apologize to the fans for it, but I learned a wealth from it. I, for one, think that they could have found success with this title if they had dropped the turntable mechanics from the get-go and instead focused on the punches and grapples having more impact and creating a series of finishing moves as well. I can't in good conscience recommend this one unless you're a diehard fan of the series like me who just wants to see where they went wrong, but I did have fun with it, both back then and again now. Def Jam Icon is not talked about fondly, oft referred to as the cousin we have entirely exiled from the family. The development team thought they had made a solid enough follow-up at the time, though, and long before any negative reviews started rolling in, they were hard at work on the since-canceled sequel, Def Jam Icon 2. It's safe to assume most of the major players from Icon were responsible for this forgotten successor, and it was planned to have several new features, including things like quick combos that led to grapples and even making your own music in the game. The foundation of this game was built sometime in 2007, immediately following the release of Icon, and was being developed simultaneously with the now infamous canceled Marvel fighting game. Development was stuttered once rumors started swirling that EA's Chicago campus would be closing down for good. These rumors held true, and in November of 2007, it was announced by EA's CEO that mass layoffs and studio closures were on the way, with the Windy City studio being one of the first on the chopping block. Several weeks later, some detailed test footage of Def Jam Icon 2 leaked to the public, showcasing a few minor improvements when compared to the first Icon game. In early 2020, a playable beta build of the game for Xbox 360 was unearthed and made available, and we were given a more detailed look into what was planned for this entry. Maps that were being worked on included an airplane tarmac and a custom car shop, while the available players are limited to your unnamed character and a new version of TI. Not all textures are drawn out here, and you're limited to the moves you can do, but to be honest, it already looked like a huge step in the right direction, with the overall fluidity and impact of your moves both seeming stronger than its predecessor. Unfortunately, Icon 2 would never see the light of day, and with the fate of the series hanging in the balance, there was only one thing they could do to breathe some life back into it: a karaoke rap game with no fighting whatsoever. Yeah, so apparently in the wake of Chicago's closure, no one thought a return to form would help this series, and instead they went in an entirely different direction. Developed by 4MM Games, former founders of Rockstar Games, Def Jam Rapstar was released in October of 2010. Developed mostly as an answer to 2004's letdown that was Get on the Mic, the game would feature a microphone peripheral that permitted you to sing along to all your favorite hip-hop tunes, all the while being scored on your performances. It released for the Xbox 360, PS3, and the Wii of all things. This entry saw mostly positive reviews, with IGN rating it a 7.5 and GameSpot giving it a 6.5, with both citing its solid selection of songs and fun remix of the garden variety singing game. It features a whopping 45 tracks to mimic, while the lyrics and low-res music videos display on screen. There are also rhythm indicators to let you know when you're doing well, a la Guitar Hero. If you're playing on PlayStation or Xbox with an additional camera peripheral, you can utilize this tech to take advantage of a live feed option within the game that adds the display of yourself performing. You can then go back and edit the videos of yourself with some simple effects and filters. This game does have a career mode, but contributes no new characters or lore to the world of Def Jam games, instead opting to only feature a list of songs to perform, with successful attempts unlocking new songs and eventually the next of 5 available stages. The T for Teen labeled was plastered on here, relegating us to the radio-friendly censored versions of these songs, which is a damn shame, as most originally had a plethora of cussing and inappropriate lyrics. In trailers, it boasted about its custom software, stating that it tracked lyrical accuracy, timing, flow, and pitch independently in order to come up with an overall score for each performance. In reality, it doesn't seem as if it's measuring much of anything, instead only checking to make sure you match the length of each word. As far as I can tell, you can sort of talk your way through each track, pausing only when they do, and pass no problem. Meth and Red make their return here, and Kevin Liles was still the head of Def Jam's interactive division for this launch. Apparently, he'd been pitching a social network aspect to a hip-hop game for some time. 4MM agreed, and some community features were added to the game, revolving around a website where you could upload videos of your performances to be rated or at least clowned by the entire internet. We no longer have access to these videos, but I bet there were some real hidden gems in there, as freestyling was highly encouraged in this game. In a 2010 interview about Rapstar, Liles commented on the potential to find new artists to sign by perusing the user-uploaded content. You never know where the next Rapstar is going to come from. You never know where the next big producer is going to come from. The act of discovery is what makes the music business great. Def Jam Rapstar will be an excellent opportunity to find talent, but also to nurture talent. We're looking at it as seriously as we can, because I do think I'm going to find the next DMX in Germany, or the next Jay-Z in China, or the next Ludacris in France, or the next Kanye West in Hawaii. It's a great opportunity because the world is in your hands. Then there's the online features within the console, namely battles and challenges against friends to see who had the better bars. Rapstar is a neat and well-executed idea, and I'd rather play this than any of the 500 SingStar games, but it really is a strange choice when they had a successful line of games already established. While it's sold well enough, little is remembered about it nowadays as the karaoke fad has all but faded away. In March of 2012, EMI recording label filed a massive lawsuit against 4MM Games for failing to secure the proper rights to use up to 54 of the songs or samples featured in Rapstar, citing copyright infringement and unpaid royalties. They were seeking $150,000 per violation, totaling in more than $8 million in damages. This lawsuit likely came as a surprise to most entities involved, as both EMI and Def Jam were owned by the same parent company by this time, Universal Music Group. The judge would ultimately decide that EMI was owed a little over $500,000 and 4MM was forced to pay along with ceasing distribution of the game. Speaking of distribution, this game was plunged into financial ruin once again just 2 months after the initial lawsuit, with publisher Konami being sued for failure to pay back a single penny of the $14 million loan they had took out under the guise of distributing Rapstar. They had apparently promised City National Bank that the game would sell around 2.5 million copies, more than even the most successful Def Jam game, and a completely unrealistic number, and that they would pay back their loan and then some as the profits came rolling in. Rapstar sold far less than 1 million copies though, and whatever profits it did generate were divvied up between Konami and Def Jam. City National Bank was seeking $8.9 million, and it's unclear how this suit finished up, but all signs point towards an out-of-court settlement in the bank's favor. These events led to the closure of 4MM Games and many hard times for the producers and designers there, many of which were literally just given a list of songs to include by their bosses in the first place and told that everything would be fine. Fans and Def Jam alum alike may have preferred if another fighting game was made instead, but were left with Rapstar as a sour footnote at the end of the series. I don't count it among the main games though, and you shouldn't either. Excluding this one, we're left with 3 main games, a trilogy if you will, with all of them featuring similar stories about power, respect, and profit. The Takeover did have some unique story elements and environments, but you'd have a tough chance of convincing any Def Jam fan that this one counts as a mainline entry. I wish I could at least say that the 3-game run ended with a bang. Instead, Icon makes a dull thud as it lands. Even so, these games hold a special place in my heart, and I won't stop showing them love anytime soon. These aren't quite annual replay levels of nostalgic for me, but every now and again I have to bust them out and have a good time. I highly recommend trying these games, especially if you were alive to experience their heyday or if you're a fan of early 2000s hip-hop and unique wrestling games. It might be a little tough to get your hands on them though, as all 3 games are getting scarcer by the day. While Vendetta and Icon are reasonably priced online, you'd have a hell of a time finding a copy in person, and I think that indicates the rarity of both titles. Finding any version of Fight for New York for under $100 is nearly impossible nowadays, and if you ever see one at a garage sale, you should snatch it up like your life depends on it. I often find myself checking PS2 game lots on nearby marketplaces, hoping to find that holy grail mint copy that no one else scrolled far enough or zoomed in enough to see. I truly love these games, and I'll talk about them to anyone who will listen. All of that being said, only one question remains: will we ever see a new game in the series? One with all the features we yearn for and a few we didn't know we needed. One where we can virtually settle the beef between Kendrick and Drake or some other hip-hop celebrity we don't even know about yet. The answer is probably not. These games were made in a time when hip-hop artists generally valued their likeness and licensing much lower than other celebrities and were easily accessible to the label that agreed to the collaboration. EA Chicago has long since closed its doors, and while the Vancouver location is still up and running, it's mainly focused on more grounded sports titles, and it's missing the original talent that brought these games to life. In the summer of 2018, the official Def Jam Twitter account polled followers asking who should be on the cover of the hypothetical next game and whether it should take place in Atlanta, Los Angeles, Chicago, or Miami. 2 years later, they tweeted again, taunting fans with the cryptic message, "The streets are saying we need a new Def Jam game." Once our Twitter hits 1 million, we have a special announcement for y'all. This account is still active and it did eventually reach 1 million followers, although I couldn't find any such announcement, at least not one pertaining to any potential video game. In 2021, after recently being made executive creative consultant for Def Jam, Snoop Dogg was asked about the games at a youth sporting event, stating, "I wish I could answer that, because before I got the job over there, I told them that one of the many things I want to do is bring that game back, because I hear about it too much, and they didn't move on it or react to it. So I may have to create my own death row fighting game." In 2022, Def Jam reposted the city's poll, again with no follow-up whatsoever. In January of 2024, Ice-T took to Twitter to comment on the situation, posting that, "So many people ask me why this game hasn't been brought back for the newer consoles. Maybe because they'd have to pay for voice and music rights again, maybe. And here's the big problem. I don't think they paid any of us anything to be in that original game. I know I didn't get any type of substantial money. It was a situation where you didn't want to be left out of the game. Well, yesterday's price is not today's price." The next month, Joe Budden spoke out during an interview with Carmelo Anthony, albeit with admittedly no real foresight or insider knowledge, claiming, "Gaming is big. Music should have more of a presence in the video game world. It seems like they're trying to redline that shit and keep it to themselves. If they're going to do that, then fuck them, I'm not with it. But if they're down to come talk business, they gotta get it right." Method Man and Redman still hang out and tour together, but their interest in gaming, or at least starring in games, has waned over the years. In the end, Kevin Liles was the only notable collaborator that lasted through the entire series, but even he seemingly retired from the music industry in September of 2024, solidifying the notion that a new game of the same header was highly unlikely, if not completely impossible. Later that month, news outlet The Guardian celebrated Fight for New York's 20th anniversary by interviewing a few of the people that made it possible. Daryl Anselmo, co-creator of the series all those years ago, was asked about the struggle of making a new game today, and I think he hit the nail on the head when he said, "Because of drill music, I don't think you could make this game today. The climate is just too hostile. But we only ever intended Def Jam Fight for New York to be a fantasy, escapist experience. It was like the gangster rap version of The Warriors. It was just a bit of fun. We trusted the audience knew it wasn't cool to throw someone out of a window in real life. We really tried to respect the culture of hip-hop." Maybe he's onto something there, as guns do dominate a lot of hip-hop nowadays, and rappers are quick to draw their weapons instead of squaring up. Lauren Wurtzer Seawood, responsible for signing on all the original performers, added her perception on why a new entry in the series is unlikely to happen. Def Jam Fight for New York cost around $15 million to make, but now that both hip-hop and video games have become global multi-billion-dollar businesses, the licensing costs would be astronomical today. I'm sure a lot of the rappers would rightly want much more money if the game was re-released today. A sequel might be one of the most expensive games of all time. A number of different parties would have to come to the table and agree. Def Jam is now owned by a number of corporate entities. A lot of the game's characters have also left the label too, so negotiating for a new game or even a remaster would be tricky and complex. There's been nothing else like it before or since, and there's a huge community of gamers who still play Fight for New York. They want a new version where they can fight modern rivals. I couldn't agree more. No studio is looking to spend $100 million on an experiment, although I would certainly find an endless supply of joy in pitting today's popular rappers against one another. Ending both the interview and this video with an energetic goodbye to his beloved franchise, Joss Holmes added his 2 cents. "I think it still fucking stands up, because it was so unexpected and risky. This weird little game captured the hearts of a hip-hop culture that desperately wanted its own video game blockbuster. I just wish we could have given Ghostface that homicidal eagle." Thank you so much for watching, tell a friend, and have a good day.